Afternoon, everybody. It's 4 o'clock, but we'll wait a few more minutes to allow some more people to join before we get started. We'll just wait one more minute in case anybody else joins, then we'll get started. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today as we talk about recycling in Decatur. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. So this session is being recorded, and that recording will be put on both the Public Works and Environmental Sustainability Board web pages on the city website after the session. Questions and comments could be submitted via the chat function that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. We'll monitor that throughout the session, but we'll also pause at a few places to take questions as they come up. And further questions and comments can be submitted to me, and I'll put my email in the chat. We're excited to have y'all here as we talk about this very important topic. So let's get started. So just for a little bit of background, the city of Decatur collects 4 separate waste streams on 4 collection days. So those are commingled recycling, glass, pay-as-you-throw trash, and yard waste. Our commingled recycling, which will obviously be the focus of today, is ultimately taken to Pratt Industries in Conyers, Georgia. In fiscal year 18-19, we collected about 2,600 tons. Glass is taken to Strategic Materials in College Park, Georgia. In 18-19, it made up about 440 tons. Our biggest waste stream is our pay-as-you-throw trash, which is taken to a DeKalb County landfill. And in 18-19, that amounted to about 4,045 tons. And yard waste is also taken with pay-as-you-throw trash to the DeKalb County landfill. And that was about 1,800 tons in 18-19. So what does our current recycling system look like? Once you put your recycling bin on the curb, what happens to it? So recycling is collected by sanitation services, and then commingled recycling is hauled to a DeKalb County transfer station, while glass is hauled directly to strategic materials in College Park, where it's turned into fiberglass and other useful materials. So the commingled recycling that's taken to DeKalb County is then taken by DeKalb County trucks along with the materials that they collect from their residents to Pratt Industries materials recovery facility in Conyers, Georgia. So once there, Pratt sorts the materials, and then depending on what it is, three kind of different things happen to it. So first, the cardboard and paper are used by Pratt in their paper mill on site. So Pratt is actually primarily interested in cardboard and paper. That's what their business model is predicated on. I believe that that logo that you see for Pratt, the 100% recycled, is actually in reference to the paper that they sell using 100% recycled material. The metals and the recoverable materials are baled and sold to in markets to be used in other industries and processes. And then contamination and non-recoverable materials are landfilled or burned for energy on site. So we'll go into a little bit more what we mean by recoverable versus non-recoverable materials later, but that is what happens to it. But how can you actually trust that what's taken to Pratt is correctly sorted and it's not just all mixed together and all landfilled? That's a common concern that we've heard, common question, but we should be able to establish reasonable confidence that Pratt is sorting materials because they have the economic incentive to do so. And they do so by the following methods, including optical scanning, hand sorting, shredding. So while plastic bags and film are still a big problem of contamination in our commingled recycling, Pratt's facility does have some capacity to shred those bags as they come in, but they still should not be in there. A heavy light separator and magnets for those metallic materials. So what does our single or commingled recycling actually look like? What's the breakdown? And so granted, this is a single load audit. So one day our director of sanitation services took a truck directly to Pratt rather than taking it to the DeKalb County transfer station because they offered to do a single load audit of our materials. And what we found is that by weight, the material that we collect the most of is corrugated cardboard and then paper, which are what Pratt is primarily interested in. Around 20% by weight of that load consisted of what they consider trash. Around 11% were plastics 1 and 2, so HDPE and PET. And those are the materials, the plastic materials that currently have in markets. And then tin, steel, and aluminum were about 7%. And these plastics 3 through 7 were only about 2% of our weight. However, they do make about 4 times that when you look at it in terms of volume. But what does this really tell us? So about 78% of the materials that we're sending to Pratt, they can recover. But that means about 22% are non-recoverable materials that we can remove from our waste stream and increase the efficiency of recovery of our materials. So kind of with that introductory information, we're going to get into kind of the main reason that we're here today. And so Obviously, this has been I think, an emerging national conversation. Everybody's asking questions about their recycling. And I think our main goal here today is to provide some clear, transparent information that we can all be on the same page, and then we can all move forward together. So the challenge to Decatur Public Works and Sanitation Services is providing a stable service to residents in a fluctuating market. It may be that on one day, Pratt, that a buyer for certain materials just emerges out of nowhere. But we want to keep our messaging as consistent as we possibly can to prevent confusion and make sure everybody trusts that the materials that they're putting in their bin are recovered. And so our vision is a sustainable, fiscally responsible, and transparent residential program that can also serve as a model for other communities. Decatur is not the only community that's struggling with this. Some other municipalities in Georgia may be struggling more so than we are even. But I think that with our staff and then the great plethora of knowledge that exists in the Decatur community, that we can hopefully solve this problem or get closer to solving it than anybody else has, and serve as a model for them. And so that's our vision, but how do we get there? So we've laid out this roadmap that you'll see on your screen. And the first step is educating our community. Once we've done that, cleaning up our recycling, while also trying to increase our alternative options that we provide. So I'll pause for a second to see if any questions have come in. Otherwise, I'll keep going. So the first step in our plan is reaching out to you. That's what we're doing here today by having this public session. That's what we did with our survey on Open City Hall. We know that we can't get to where we want to go unless we're all going there together. And so over the next few months, we'll be working on a comprehensive outreach campaign so that every Decatur resident knows what's changing, why it's changing, and how and when those changes will be made. So in spring of 2021, start to look out for some articles in the Decatur Focus. We've gotten some comments about the city website could be improved, and I'll be the first one to kind of echo that. Reaching out via social media, and then creating new door hangers and other physical materials that people can use to see the recycling guidelines, recycling dates, etc. I also want to direct people, if they're interested, to our recycling FAQs that can be found on the ESD website at the link below. That's a really great resource for you to use to, one, just learn more, but also as an educational resource. I'm sure that in your daily or weekly travels, you'll talk to a neighbor and they'll say something about the recycling that you may think is true or weird, or I don't know. But I think the FAQs are a really great place to get reliable and correct information that you can share to help us kind of dispel some of the myths that exist in Decatur around our recycling. So kind of our next step is updating our recycling guidelines. So on the left, you'll see our current Decatur RAC card, physical copies of which can be found in most city buildings. And then it's also put out online and through the Decatur Focus. But I think we've heard from people that the guidelines could be improved. And so our goal is to create simple, visual, easy to follow guidelines like what you see from the city of Atlanta. And so what's great about this card is it's more streamlined. It has clear instructions on how to prevent contamination, making sure that cans and bottles are empty and rinsed. And and helps to ensure the recovery of the materials that we actually want going in our recycling bin. So that's what we're moving towards. That process is still ongoing, but that's kind of our where we're headed.
I think it's important to note. Sorry to interrupt, David. I think it's important to note that the details, that if some of you were looking closely at that slide, the details of what is on either one of these things is not necessarily what we are also going to be doing. It's really just a model for the simplistic rack card, so that we have an easier to read, more understandable situation.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. So our next step, once we've kind of gotten the word out about what we're doing and why we're doing it, is really taking the steps to clean up our recycling. So currently in our recycling bins, there are kind of 3 classes of materials that go in there. The first is what we want. Those are the clean, empty cans, bottles, jugs, cardboard, paper, everything that you see in this kind of blue category here, that have in market and are recovered by Pratt and either used on site or sold to other users. So that's what we want. What we currently, what shouldn't be there, we classify as contamination, and that consists of things like bagged recycling, plastic bags and film, tanglers. So we actually already fielded a question over at Public Works about, can I put faulty Christmas lights in my recycling bin? No, you should not do that. Those materials can damage the equipment at the MRF and shut down facilities. So those materials, I think Christmas lights can be taken to the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, which we'll highlight later in the presentation. And then food and liquids. So we get a question a lot about like pizza boxes. And so pizza boxes with just some grease are totally acceptable. But what we don't want is pizza boxes with pizza crust still in there, or liquid, or like what you see in these plastic clamshells. We don't want plastic clamshells either, but the food and liquid is what should be removed. So making sure that your materials are empty, and then doing a quick once over with rinsing. And then kind of the third classification is those materials that we currently accept in our curbside service, but are not ultimately recovered by Pratt. And so those consist of things like plastics number 5 and 6. So yogurt tubs and styrofoam, plastic clamshells, black plastic flower pots. So those are those materials that do not currently have strong enough in market that it's economically viable for Pratt to sort and sell them. So they are just being landfilled or burned and waste energy. And we want residents to know from the point of purchase to putting their bin on the curb what will actually be recycled. So that's our biggest goal there. And so I think it's easy to think about problems like recycling as, oh, it's happening somewhere else, or it's not here in Decatur. And these pictures were actually taken just last week in Decatur. So it is a problem everywhere, but it's a problem that also exists here. So what you see is plastic film, styrofoam, bagged recycling, and that's what we do not want. So we've talked about what contamination is, but why is it a problem? Why should we actually care about it? So contamination can increase program costs to the city, which then have to be passed on to the residents, increasing in higher sanitation fees. It can also prevent the recovery of usable materials. So a small amount of contamination can prevent the recovery of a larger amount of really good material that can be reused in other things. And then ultimately it can damage roof equipment, like I said, with those Christmas lights. But if we turn that on our head, what we see is that although there may be some short-term costs to reducing contamination, that there will be some long-term benefits that greatly outweigh those. Yes, Mesa, I think you had, is there a comment, question?
I realized that it looked like I had my hand up. I was just resting against the wall.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, so like what I said, that, you know, there will be some short-term costs, and this process can take some time, but once we do it, and if we do it right, the long-term benefits greatly outweigh those short-term costs. So now we know what contamination is and why it's a problem, but how can we actually get it out of our bins? And so one great model to follow on that are programs commonly known as tip and tag. So tip and tag programs have been tried in cities across the country, including right next door to Atlanta and in Newton, Massachusetts. And I think what we saw in Newton was that they were able to cut their contamination rates in half about. But, you know, how do they do it? Or why did it work? And the key to that was combining education, like we've talked about, with enforcement. Education is obviously the first step, and it's hugely important, but it's not enough to really make a difference unless there's some follow-up behind that through programs like Tip and Tag. So how it works, it's typically a rolling initiative throughout a city's service area. And so they'll do one part of the city on these 2 weeks, and then they'll move on. And so the first time that volunteers or people working or city crews notice that there's contamination, there are materials in your recycling bins that should not be there, they leave an oops tag, or like what you see on your screen. And so they'll make a quick mark of what the material was that needs to be taken out next time, and they'll still collect it. And then second time, if they see that it's another mistake is made, they'll leave that tag, and then they'll also refuse to collect your bin. And the logic behind that is that if you don't get your recycling collected for 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever, at some point you will actually make the efforts to take those materials out and know what should be going in. While we're still kind of working out the details on this, but we're hoping to roll this out sometime in spring of next year. So look for more information on that. So I'm going to pause one more time to see if there are any questions that have come in.
I've answered a few in the Q&A. None have come in the chat, but if you want to elaborate on anything in the Q&A, but I think I got them.
Oh, thank you. So our kind of next step and thing that we hope to increase in the future is providing accessible alternative options for those hard to recycle materials that are not currently being recovered by Pratt, or those materials that you can't put in your bin under our current guidelines. So we typically try to offer 2 specialized recycling events per year, electronics and styrofoam recycling in the fall, and then paper shredding and styrofoam in the spring. Unfortunately, as you probably know, we were not able to offer those this year due to the coronavirus, but we hope as soon as it is safe for us to do so to continue offering those. And then we also wanted to kind of outline a few alternative destinations for those things. So grocery bags can be taken to most grocery stores where they have drop-off bins in the front, and they use those to turn them into other materials and also new bags, I think. And then those plastics 3 through 7, the hard to recover plastics, and then specialized materials like paint, fertilizer, light bulbs, and other electronics and things can be taken to the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials, which is located on Hill Street in Atlanta. Currently, they're operating by appointment only, and there are some small fees associated with disposal of certain items. So check their website for more information. But they are a really great resource to residents in Decatur. It's actually, when you go there, they ask for your zip code to know who they're serving, and the 30030 zip code is very common at the Charm facility. So Decatur residents really take advantage of it. And then some specialized materials like toys, crayons. There's a company called TerraCycle that offers some recycling options for those. They'll send you a box specialized for kind of what it is you want to get rid of, and then they'll pick up that box once it's full. And then I would also encourage anybody that if you have a material that you're unsure about or want to make special care to get recycled, visit earth911.com, and it'll give you the option to type in your material, and then it'll come up with the options that are around you. And then what are our future possibilities that we as a city can offer? And so one thing that we heard in our recycling survey is that there is support for making those recycling events that we do more frequent, establishing a permanent drop-off location like some communities offer, and then partnering with Charm or another nonprofit for expanded pop-up recycling events, which they're currently doing in communities like Brookhaven and Chamblee. So I've alluded to this a little bit, but a couple of weeks ago, we posted a survey on Open City Hall, and we got over 400 responses, which I think was a record for that platform. And so we just wanted to go into some of those results a little bit. So like I said, 446 respondents, which equated at approximately 3 minutes per response to 22 hours of public comment, which is great. And so one of our key findings were that most respondents do consult guidelines before putting items in their bin, which tells us that if we do go through the efforts to update our recycling guidelines and make them clearer and easier to use, that people will look at them before they put their recycling bins out. Only about 1/10 of respondents have had their recycling rejected in the past, and which was interesting because we got some comments that people didn't realize that recycling was ever rejected. So it is hard for crews to see all the issues in a bin just from their glance that they do, but and then about 70% of respondents have taken advantage of our city recycling events that we offer, and some want them more frequently. And then this was a little bit surprising that 95% of respondents would take materials to a drop-off location inside the city. So removing those hard to recycle plastics that are not currently recovered, if we could find a vendor that would take those, that 95% of the people that took the survey would be willing to separate those out from their normal recycling and take them to a location in the city. We also asked two kind of short answer questions at the end of the survey. The first was about questions and concerns about our current recycling service. And then, so these were kind of the top 3 themes that came out. One was kind of questions about, can a certain item actually be recycled? Second is plastic actually recycled, which is kind of a reflection about or on the kind of myths and misinformation and confusion that does exist in the city or among city residents about recycling services, and shows us that we do need to do more to kind of combat those and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And third, that service costs too much or is too complicated, which is we strive to provide exceptional service and to our residents, and sometimes there are costs associated with that. But something that I think we can do is, like we were saying, is simplifying our recycling guidelines and making it as easy on residents as we possibly can, while also achieving our vision of a sustainable and fiscally responsible service. I've pulled out a few quotes here that you can see. There is some concern that most people won't bother to look hard for updated recycling guidelines or resources, and so doing as much as we can to follow through on that kind of comprehensive outreach campaign and get the message out there. There's some concern that it doesn't really get sorted when it goes to our MRF, and I hope that I've kind of dispelled that they do have the technology and the resources to do that sorting. And then again, that we need to simplify and make it as easy on people as we possibly can. Then what are people's ideas for improvement to our recycling service? One is that people would love composting to be added to our service, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. Second, that education needs to be clearer and more consistent, which I think we agree with, and is part of the reason that we started this effort with this session today. Non-recyclable materials should be rejected, and then special drop-off events are popular, which I've touched on a little bit. So one thing that is in the works and was budgeted for this year was a waste characterization study. And so what that is a professional detailed assessment of the waste streams that the city is collecting from its single-family residences. And so what that will really do is provide us a level of information on types and volumes of recyclables and compostable organic materials that goes kind of beyond the data that we currently have. One reason is to give us a baseline to determine our success in future efforts, but also really inform kind of the changes that we make and make sure that we're doing those in a data-driven way that will actually improve service to Decatur residents. So we're hoping to get that RFP released soon, and then having that study done in the spring of next year. So those are all the slides that I have. We can see if any other questions have come in, or if any of you all on the from the ESB want to say anything.
Thank you, David, for that. That was very informative. Can we field questions, if there are any, from the folks via audio and not via the Q&A?
We have one that just came in the Q&A, and I don't have an answer, so that might be a David Nifong answer. How do you account for what goes into the water system from a garbage disposal that might go into compost if it were available?
So if the way that I'm understanding that question is, how do we kind of assess the amount of that material that people are just currently putting in their waste disposal rather than throwing it in their garbage bin? And that is a good question that I don't really have an answer for. But we do hope that if we were able to provide a composting service that we can capture as much usable food waste as possible in that service.
I would just add to that, yes, it's hard to measure that because it's just a metric that would be difficult to do that. But if and when composting is launched, I think that would be part of the educational campaign, not to use a disposal because of the detrimental effects that disposals have, and that having your food waste composted is probably the best. Short of not having food waste at all, is the best alternative. So it would be in part just educating the public in the launch of our composting service.
We have another question in the Q&A about the garbage bags, doing away with garbage bags, or a comment asking, why should I put my waste in a plastic bag if there's no food waste in it? Why not just a container like recycling? There's been, in that public comment section, there was a good number of thoughts about the plastic bags, the pay-as-you-throw bags. So David, I will let you answer those.
So our pay-as-you-throw system was created in the late 1990s to help us achieve a goal that actually came down from the state of Georgia. They mandated that all municipalities divert at least 25% of their materials that they were currently sending to landfill. The landfills were just being overused, and so we created the pay-as-you-throw system to try to achieve that, and we were able to reach about 40% diversion. It's how we pay for our service. But I think that with the waste characterization study and then the work that we're doing now, I think that we are trying to assess like a kind of comprehensive overhaul to waste service that makes sense for staff and residents. And so thank you for your comment. I think it's something that we'll use, but currently there's no plan to change that.
And then there's some curiosity. Oh, we have 15 people who are participating right now. That was a question about the efficacy of outreach like this. We got, as David mentioned, like 400 or so responses to the survey, but that did not translate, despite our efforts, into 400 people attending this session. But thank you, Sonali, for being one of those people.
I'll pick up on a question that was posed in the Q&A section real quickly that might help some folks. So Molly made the comment that Charm says they take number 5 plastics, and she asked, what do they do with them? And Mesa responded that Charm currently sends that material to Nexus Fuels, which is a company up in Marietta that converts waste plastics, primarily plastics number 4 and number 6, through a chemical process into fuels and industrial lubricants. The reason I wanted to call out this particular question is because it kind of raises a bigger question. You know, how is Charm able to accept this material and recover this material while our recycling contractor Pratt can't? And it comes down to a fundamental difference in their business models. Charm is a nonprofit. Pratt is a for-profit company. Pratt will only do what will make them money. So the items that they recover are the items that they're able to sell. They're the items that currently have a robust market, either in the state of Georgia or somewhere in the region. In many instances, if you look at Charm, a lot of the items that they collect, they either give it away for free, or in some instances, they even have to pay the end user to take the material off their hands. So for that reason, Charm is dependent on donations and on volunteer labor to help their operation run. So that's why they're in a position to take more materials than a for-profit recycling provider like Pratt is. So hopefully that clarifies things a little bit.
On the question of the reach regarding this particular thing, 15 people is not that many. But you know, as David said, this recording will be available, and we really encourage you, if you are one of those 15 people listening, to please share this out, share the link out once it's finalized and up there on your neighborhood Facebook pages, on Nextdoor, all these places, because these questions get asked a lot. And obviously there's a lot of invested people who filled out that survey, just not quite invested enough to, to come to an hour session on this, so.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Nathan. Yeah,
that's a good point. And I would just echo that and say, if there's a takeaway for the 15 folks that did take their time out and join us, one, thank you very much. The takeaway is, for the time being, refer to that rack card, and let's try to keep that trash component out of our recycle bins. So if we can do that and clean that up, that's a great first step. So, you know, talk to your neighbors and your friends about that. Try to keep those bins as clean as possible until we launch our new campaign. And that would be a great thing that you could start doing right away.
Thanks, Holly. You're saying you only got the notice yesterday. Yeah, it's tough to tell how people find out about these things. We've been posting for a while on social media, and it's been on, that survey's been available, plus the advertisement for the event for, I want to say 3 weeks, and we even actually postponed it for 1 week to get more people. So I'm not sure when people are finding out, and maybe people aren't finding out, but the 400 people who took the survey certainly should have seen that in the same place where they took the survey.
And these things are tough, and 15 folks coming to one of these things is not actually bad, believe it or not. You know, that's a pretty good amount for these types of forums. Believe it or not, there's a lot, but there are a lot more people that care about the issue than the 15. Obviously, the survey shows that, and there's more than the 400 people that took the time to do that. People's lives are busy, and we're turned upside down because of so many different things. So, again, what you've done already by coming here is great, but if I can further ask you to be our army and spread this message about the importance of keeping our recycle stream clean, that is just, it would be a wonderful help.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. I'll echo that from the point of view of the Public Works Department, that it makes our job much easier and makes our system as effective as it possibly can be when we have resident buy-in. So thank you. Unless there are any other questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. And like I said, we'll get this recording posted on our city website.
There's just one more question here. The ideas here can be included in the strategic planning. Yes. And I believe that we are, I don't know about the recycling specifics, making it into like this level of detail, making it into the strategic plan. David, maybe you can speak to that.
So what our strategic plan will do is kind of take the comments that they've been hearing throughout the process. And I think one of people's big focuses has been on sustainability and our waste services. And so I don't know exactly what level of detail, like you said, those recommendations will go into the plan as, but it's certainly something that we on the staff hear frequently, and so we'll work to kind of devise the next steps about how we can make our whole waste collection service as effective as it can be. Well, once again, thanks everybody for taking the time out of your day to come, help spread the word, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it. And thank you all.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
great
much,
evening.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.